Brown, whose history and experience is invaluable and indispensable for this conversation that we are pursuing. And with us also is Coach Genevieve Queenum, who is a mental health coach and a life coach as well. And of course, my name is Angela Gibson, pursuing a better version of myself all the time. Tonight, we are going to jump into this conversation. We want it to be interactive. Put your comments in the chat, ask questions, interrupt, make it robust, and again, very interactive. Today, let me just say to Dr. Brown, go ahead and introduce yourself and give the audience a little feedback of your background so that they can hear it from you, not just me telling them about.
Okay, well, good evening. It's always a pleasure to come on. I am a licensed psychotherapist. I'm a coach. I'm a Christian. Anybody who knows me knows that that's the highest of my priority. And I've been in practice for, well, let's say over 20 years, okay? I don't want to scare anybody. But what that means is I know something about something. And that is what I want to share today. Today, we're going to talk about one way of changing our attitude for altitude, and that is by taking care of our soul. And
why is this conversation so important, Dr. Brown, to talk about the self-care for the soul? Why is that so important? Please remind us.
Well, it's very important because our soul is that part of us that while we can't see it, it's the only thing that's going to remain of us. It consists of our mind, our will, our intellect, our emotions, our imaginations. And all these things work together to create thoughts in our minds that turn into feelings. And then those feelings sometimes can create sensations within us. And to the extent that those sensations are disturbing, it can cause us to make decisions that are not in our best interest. In other words, we won't live our best life if we don't take time to look at our souls and to do the thing that we need to do to take care of it.
It's funny that you're saying, living our best lives, because that's a very common or popular saying these days. People are out there living their best lives. But generally, when they're talking about that, they're not talking about taking care of the soul. They're talking about a vacation in Bali, or they're on the beach, or they're, buying vacation homes, living their best life. But to hear you talk about the best life, living your best life in the context of taking care of your soul, is really a worthy conversation for us to have. Before we continue, I want to hear a little bit from Genevieve about your background and why you think this conversation is worth having. Genevieve, Coach Genevieve. You're on mute, Genevieve.
I'm Coach Genevieve Queenum. I am a independent Maxwell coach trainer, a disco trainer, and also a Christian coach. And it's very important for me to be here, and I'm very honored to share again this time with Dr. Brown. And from the small description she just presented, for me it is that today we're going to talk about real things. I mean, real way of reaching our altitude, because as Angela said, most of the time, people shows happiness, but in fact, when they are alone, they don't experience happiness. They are not well their soul. And then tonight, I think that we're gonna explore a way to be, to experience really inner peace, inner serenity. Right. And I think that this is very important.
Very important, absolutely. So let's take a conversation back up to the top, and Dr. Brown, just give us an idea of what it means. What does self-care mean to you from, your years of experience in treating people, with their emotional journey?
So you alluded to a part of self-care, and it is,
Mm-hmm.
going on a vacation. That's a really nice thing to do. Doing your nails,
Yeah,
getting your feet did,
my French
uh,
manicure.
doing all of these things are important because it makes us feel good on the outside. But
Mm-hmm.
what Genevieve alluded to is that the outside alone is not enough. The inside is crucial.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because the inside, if it's in order, it's going to reflect outside, and then you're really going to be able to enjoy that vacation. You won't just be putting on a show like folks who go on to Instagram. I'm not picking on Instagram or anything, but you have, when you go on Instagram, you see people living all these wonderful, gorgeous lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to know because I had somebody who was quite influential in doing that. And their life was absolutely miserable. 1,000 friends. And when they got sick, there was one friend.
Nobody is true.
Wow.
So taking care of our soul means being okay with who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're okay with who we are, we're going to draw the right people to us. We're going to draw
Absolutely.
people who are caring, and because, you won't allow the others to come. They will try to come, but boundaries will say, no, you're not welcome here.
So this idea of going from your exchanging your attitude for your altitude in the context of taking care of your soul, can you speak to that a little bit more, either of you? How does it apply, get into your altitude as it relates to taking care of your soul? Why does the two have anything to do with each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if you are a fish and you want to make a race with a rabbit, you you may have some trouble, maybe in troubles, because you will keep being frustrated and asking yourself, why do I cannot make just like the rabbit? Because you don't you are not okay with who you are.
Right.
And what Dr. Brown said is very deep. I think that it matters to be okay with who we are.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what we've been discussing in the past is these cognitive distortions that interfere with our altitude. And Dr. Brown, can you just run over some of the ones that we have been over so far? I remember a few, and you can fill in the gaps where I missed. We talked about personalization. We talked about emotional reasoning. We talked about all or nothing thinking the past few weeks. We talked about catastrophizing. Tonight, we're going to talk about labeling. I can't remember all of them. But what we are trying to do here on the platform is to go through the different cognitive distortions that interfere with our altitude so that we can have a very conscious and determined effort to make sure that we correct the inaccurate thinking that is causing these distortions. And it starts with us taking care of our souls, the self-care for the soul, ends this discussion. So from that perspective, Dr. Brown, we can jump into the conversation about labeling, which is the distortion that we're going to discuss tonight.
Well, actually, I'd like to take a little detour before I go there.
Okay.
Because I think more needs to be said about the soul.
All righty.
You see, our soul is the only part of us that never changes.
Mhm.
Our soul experiences various things. You know, in a world, in an imperfect world, we encounter a lot of pain. And the big problem, this is a real key thing. This is really, really, really important. You see, when we're little, we're not able to make distinctions about a lot of things. We just don't understand. And so we can come to conclusions about things that are totally inaccurate if we don't have the proper guidance. That is the purpose for our parents. You know, the slightest little thing, it doesn't matter. You need to be able to come to mommy and daddy and say, hey, this is happening. I don't understand it. That's where you get your answers from. I'll give you a for instance. It's kind of funny, but you know.
Mhm.
So my son, my youngest son, when he was little, you know, he was in elementary school, and they wanted to give him a health class or something like that. And I didn't read the paper. I should have read the paper. Please, y'all, read the paper, okay? To find out what in the world they're going to talk about. Well,
Mhm.
anyway, as it turns out, they were talking about sexuality, and they had the condom and all this stuff. And he came home upset, seriously upset. And I said, son, he said, and that,
Your your sound is going in and out.
yes, he says, I don't fit in that. I'm not big
Mm.
enough to fill up that condom. Something is wrong with me.
Oh, wow.
And I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. He said, yes, but there's a big difference between how big that condom is and how big I am.
Funny.
And I said to him,
Yeah.
yes, there is a difference. I said, but don't worry about it. You'll grow into it. He says, really? He says, absolutely. I said, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. And he said, okay. And that was the end of that conversation. Now,
Mm.
that was a simple thing for him. No, for him, it was a big thing. For me, as an adult, it was a simple thing, but it could have turned into something much, much bigger, especially if he went to seek advice from people who were unethical.
Right.
They could have turned it in all kinds of different directions. Well, just like he had his crisis that you laughed at, and I laughed too, but not, I didn't let him see me laugh, you know, because he took it serious. So I took it serious too, you know. But we have many experiences like that basically tell us whether or not we are okay. It
Mm.
tells us whether or not we're worthy of love. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This
Now,
is
there are other messages besides the one on love, but I'm going to stick with the one on love. Why? Because the feeling of not being loved creates an unsettlement in our hearts. And when we get unsettled, we're scattered. And when we're scattered, we can't see the full picture.
yeah.
And the full picture, and not being able to see the full picture, is what we refer to as cognitive distortions.
Mm.
And sometimes it's also referred to as negative thinking. Now, see, that's a worldly view. Here we come, all right? Why do I say that's a worldly view? Because God said anything he created was good. Everything he created was good. He didn't create no messed up people. We messed up, but that
Yeah.
doesn't make us a mess. And there's
I
a
like that.
big, yes,
Yeah.
there's a lot of confusion around that. See, the confusion ends up being, well, I'm little. I don't understand things. I make lots of mistakes. I come to inaccurate conclusions. You know, just like my son did. He could end up thinking that somehow or another he wasn't good enough. He's not as good as other guys. But
Mm.
my explanation helped them to see, no, there's a whole different story. Now, if he didn't get that explanation, he would have been thinking, I'm not like other guys. Now he doesn't go around looking at other guys' penis, so he doesn't know how big it is. Okay. He
Sure.
knows he shouldn't be. That would be another problem. Okay.
Yeah.
But he could come to that conclusion. And you see that the idea of talking about one thing, if I couldn't talk to him about that one thing, I wouldn't have been able to talk to him about many other things that I needed to have conversations with him about.
Yeah.
And as those things start to pile up, confusion sets in him. And he starts to feel inadequate. That shows up when he goes to elementary school.
You know, it's funny, Dr. Brown, that you're talking about this thing with the penis. I mean, I know it's because I had a similar experience. I mean, I don't have a penis, but when I was a little girl, my little brother, he was about 3 years younger than me. I was probably about 6. He pulled off his pants, so I yanked his penis. My mother caught me doing it. And I got the beating of my life. I mean, it was so bad. I still remember it. I still remember sitting on the thing after she finished beating me without no explanation at all. And to this day, that is such a real and vivid memory because, and the effects and the impacts that it had on me, I'm sure contributes to some of the anxiety struggles that I have, emotionally speaking, because I didn't have that explanation that you were so gracious enough to give your son. And it's not that my mother's a bad person. She just wasn't educated. She herself was brought up that way. So she passed it on to me. And just to hear the fact that you explained it to your son almost wants to bring me to tears because it was such a different experience for your son to be able to listen to his mom say, you'll grow into it. It's totally normal and it was not a big deal. And that really does help because I'm sure that experience has certainly contributed to some of my cognitive distortions. There's no way that I could have come away from that without being impacted in a negative way as a little girl.
Yeah.
And similarly, for a girl, one of the things that happens to us is we have our period. That's real.
Yeah.
There are some parents who don't even talk about it.
I know.
The girl goes to school, the blood is running down. Some classmate says, here, you should use this. And 3 months later, the mother said, when did you start doing that? When did that happen? See? And in the meantime, she's thinking thoughts about herself that are not in a good way.
Right.
She's thinking something's wrong with me. She could be thinking I'm dying.
Yeah.
And when if she shares these thoughts with her peers, they could laugh at her. And now she's feeling out of place. So, enough of those kinds of experiences, and you get a message. And the message is, you're not worthy of love. You're not worthy of anybody spending time with you to explain things to you. So then you don't expect anybody to spend the time. And if they're trying to spend the time, you're looking for some negativity to come, because that's what happened, in your home.
Wow.
And
Genevieve, have you had an experience with this? With any of this?
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about it, because it's remind me my daughter and my stepdaughter too. So the first time when they had their menstruation, I mean, they were literally crying because they thought that there was something bad happening to them. But well, on this place, on this point particularly, culturally, we have been raised, to make this moment solemn and to talk about. But I discover at the same time, it was the first time for me too. I never had a daughter before who had it, and to discover that there was some video on YouTube who helped the young girl understand better this, and I was surprised to see those videos, but it helped me also. But what Dr. Brown said is very important. It's an important parenting topic like this, because I see that there is a responsibility each person have in growing in our attitude, because it can be with your kids, but it can be also with your team if you're a leader. It can be with your family. And what I have heard from you tonight is that the more you are intentional in your growth, in your attitude to reach this altitude, is benefit not only for you but for people around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because she grew in her altitude, she was able to adjust her son's attitude about himself.
Exactly.
Because she, as a mom, was aware.
Exactly.
And so she didn't, hijack her son's self-esteem by telling me, "Oh, you're ridiculous. Of course, it's not going to fit you. You're not, it's because you're a little boy." All of that could have done a number on him in a negative way that would have left an impact to this day. But he probably doesn't even remember the incident, or even if he does, he doesn't remember anything negative about it now because of the way she addressed it. It's amazing how these little things do impact our altitude.
Yeah.
So that is the connection between the soul and the experiences that we have. Our souls holds all of our memories. Remember the mind? It stays there. And if we have good memories, then we will do very well in life. We will reach whatever it is that we want to reach. And if we don't, we won't fall too far from it. But we certainly will want to try. But if our experiences are negative and we think, well, I don't deserve to have anything like that. I'm not a lovable person. Other people can have love, but that doesn't belong to me. And so when someone comes by and they mistreat me, I get confused, but I'm used to being mistreated, so I accept it, even though I don't like it. So
that's sad.
These things cause us to see things in a fractured way or in an incomplete way. And that's called cognitive distortion. And the one that we're going to cover today is called labeling.
Okay, before you go on, let me just welcome our guests, Anita, Patricia, Veronica. Please, well, first of all, thank you for joining us. And please, like we asked before, interrupt the conversation, ask the questions. There's nothing off limits. And Dr. Brown, you can continue. So tell us now then, how does labeling, this particular cognitive distortion that may have developed when we were younger, can affect us now or impact us now? How does it show up, this idea of labeling?
Okay. The idea of labeling shows up in that we don't really take the time to look at the person. We look at the behaviors. And based on the behavior and our level of annoyance, we slap a not so nice title on the person. Or we can even slap it on ourselves. Things like, I'm stupid. Or,
but wait a minute, Dr. Brown. I mean, in this society, that's all we have to go by is people's behavior. I mean, but what else would you suggest we go by?
well, the important thing is to separate the person from their behavior. The two things are not the same. And many people.
I agree with you, but in this society, nobody has time for the backstory. I mean,
well, you don't need a backstory to respect somebody.
Okay.
Okay. The fact that they're a human being, and hopefully, depending on your values, I think that we have Christian people, attending this. But even if you don't have to be a Christian to value other people. You wouldn't go around calling people stupid. You wouldn't call yourself stupid. Now, there's a difference between saying you are stupid and that thing that you did was stupid. Yeah. Because if the thing that I did was stupid, that means that, well, I can change it. My self-esteem is still intact.
Right.
But if I'm stupid, then I'm stuck. I'm nervous. I can't think straight. If I don't think straight, I can't see straight. I'm not going to come up with the right conclusions. And then I'm going to make decisions based on fantasy, not on reality.
Okay, so sometimes it's not that we're calling other people stupid, it's that we're calling ourselves stupid, or we're calling ourselves, oh, you're so slow, or and sometimes we're not even aware of it. That's the thing. We're so seasoned to speak negatively to ourselves, so we label ourselves and we call ourselves names, but we would not call another person that because of
some people do.
Some people do call other people, but a lot of times the way we also talk to ourselves is worse than the way we talk to other people.
Yeah.
Which is also, really sad. But, I think of the scripture that says that God says we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. And every time I think about that scripture, I think about the fact that God expects me to love me first.
Yeah.
Implied in that is that, Angela, you need to love you so that you can love somebody else. And if I haven't received the love I'm supposed to get, if I was labeled or treated in a way where I end up labeling myself now in life, what can I do to correct that distortion so that I don't go around as an adult labeling myself and labeling other people and loving myself the way God asked me to love myself?
Well, you can go, there's two ways to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
One, you can go the humanistic way, and that is to just go get yourself straight counseling. And there's benefit to that.
Mm-hmm.
I must tell you, though, that regardless of what types of therapeutic procedures are used, up to this point, I think that the best you can look for is about 70% improvement.
A C. That's a C grade.
That's a C grade. But a C is better than a D or an F.
True.
Okay, if you're functioning on a D or an F, C looks very good because C is passing. So that's what humanism can give you. Okay. But now, if you go to the spiritual perspective, provided you are willing to submit to God's authority, you can expect 100% recovery. That's what he said. Jesus said, I came to give you life and to give it to you abundantly.
So, and it's all in the expectation. I recently learned a message I heard a message at church. The guy was talking about the expectation. How a lot of times people walk away from the church, or they walk away from their relationship with God because they were expecting to find a spouse. They were expecting this and they were expecting that. And when that expectation is not fulfilled, they become disillusioned. And he made the point to say, kind of like what you just said, is that we have to expect to be healed when we turn to God. We have to have that expectation. And sometimes we're trying to get the expectation filled by other things to take care of our souls, which doesn't work.
Well, I think there's something behind that too. Okay.
Okay.
And what's behind that is, who's the boss? Who's running the show? Who's God? Are you God? Well, if you think you're God and you expect things to happen and they don't happen, well, yes, you're going to go off in a tizzy. But now, if you are born again, which means not only is Jesus Christ your Savior, but he is your Lord. You don't go to him and tell him how to do his job. You go to him and you ask him what you would like. And then you sit back and wait to hear what he has to say. And he can answer yes, he can answer no, he can answer wait. So therefore, if you're running off in a hot tizzy, I think there's an issue with submission. You might just be one of those people that think you got Jesus confused with the ATM machine.
Yeah.
Wow. So can you give us an example of somebody that you may have treated or that you know of in your experience that struggle with labeling, Genevieve? Do you have anybody in your mind or in your history that you can say you saw how it was manifested in their life?
Labeling actually is a big topic that Dr. Brown is talking about like this. And coming from an African background, it's a serious problem. Because, it's a serious problem because people have, in many African culture, to label negatively kids. And it is a kind of preventing bad things happening. It's just like a way to hide the child. Let's say that when you have a young girl who's really cute, you will never say, hey, cutie, but you will say, hey, ugly girl. That's the way it's in there. It's in the culture. It's a way of not exposing the child. It's in the protective way. But actually, what we are sharing here is that it can become, something that can create, a cognitive distortion. And I was thinking about what you were saying, Angela, because it's true that we have to expect something from God when we come to God. But I think that it can be the problem of some people. They expect all from God, while there is a step. There is a personal step that we have to do. There is a personal action. Because the Bible said it in Hebrew, I think 11:6. They say that when you come to God, you have to believe that you can receive something from God. But it means that also you believe that you can receive it. Because some people ask God things that they even don't believe that they can receive.
That's true.
Yeah, so this is very, very deep and interesting.
Okay, well, Dr. Brown, how does labeling show up with people that you have, treated?
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about some, not one person. I'm going to, this is a combination of people.
Okay.
And I'm just going to come up with a name for it. So I'm going to call her Anna. So Anna's early beginning was horrible. She was the child of a rape.
Oh, wow.
Her mother didn't like her. Her mother was forced to keep her. And so she never had time. She didn't have time for her. She was impatient with her from little. She would scream at her. And you see some people do that. Well, I haven't been around a whole bunch of people because of the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, there were a number of young mothers and some not so young, and they would scream at their children as if they were grown people.
Yeah.
They would curse at their children.
So sad.
They didn't take time. They didn't want to be bothered. And in Anna's case, her mother didn't want to be bothered because every time she looked at her, she was reminded of an unpleasant thing that happened to her. And not only was that something that she had to deal with her mother, okay, but everybody else in the family decided that they would take turns and, misuse her one way or another, okay? So she felt unloved. She was called names, and she believed those names. Now, when she went to school, she was, of course, lost. Her soul was trapped in negativity. She didn't know the difference between her soul and the negativity that was pushed on her. She got it confused. That's a long, basically it's, instead of judging the actions that were done to her, she judged herself as if she was actions. So she didn't get along with the children in school. And children can be cruel. They called her names. She ended up being placed in one of those class for slow children. And so she just seemed to have a series of things that said to her, you are not acceptable. You are not okay. And these things continued on even to dating. Remember, she didn't value herself. So she was not even, what's really strange? Even if someone valued her and treated her right, she would not accept it.
Exactly.
Wow.
She could not accept their love because she truly believed that she was fundamentally flawed. And despite the fact that she was a very bright girl. She is a very bright woman. She's very high IQ. But she is stuck. She is stuck in minimum wage jobs. simply because she doesn't feel that she's worthy of having anything. She's not worthy of love. And so she ends up in relationships in which she's always mistreated.
So that sounds like an extreme example, and it's a very sad story. But is it possible, Dr. Brown, for you to have very high altitude in one area of your life, where people look at you on the outside and you look like you got it together? I mean, you got the kids, you got the husband, you got the career, you got the this, but then there's another area of your life where you're flying at a very low altitude, and nobody would ever know. You don't even know that you have labeled yourself, because from what you see, even of yourself, you've achieved all these other things, and other people see these other things. Is it possible for the two to coexist, where you have a high altitude here, but in another area down here, you're flying at a very low altitude? How can a person become more self-aware that they have these two opposing phenomenons or situations going on with them? The altitude and the attitude at the same time, and the low altitude at the same time.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Genevieve?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think it's possible. I think it's very possible, because I truly believe that we will always have a space to grow in our lives. Mm-hmm. And even what I have noticed in my faith journey is that God will never allow us to be, if I can say, complete on this earth. We will always have challenging things that we have to face, because that's I think is the only way to grow. And the thing is that you may have all these things in your life that seems to be fulfilled, and that you reach your altitude in this and this and this. But when you are alone, you are able to know that there is something in my life that doesn't work. And one of the simple thing is that when you are with other people in your interaction, in your relationship, you know that there is some. It can be just a way, a mindset that you notice with someone else. It can be just a way of you see some people, and you feel that these people have confidence. These people are truly they have assurance, and you can see that this is what I need to have. This is what I feel. I feel that this is a big gap in my personality, and I think that these are spot to grow, and I think that it's possible. Yeah.
I do think it's possible too to have both. I don't know if it's the same thing though, because it's one thing to know that I have an area to growing, but it's another thing to be suffering from labeling, which is keeping me in the low altitude. So I just wanted to, that's why I asked the question, because yeah, we all need to grow, it's true. But then there's the other part where the reason why we're not growing is because we're suffering from a cognitive distortion like labeling. And so how does the person become aware, or become, what path or steps can they take to level up, to become more aware that they need to get some coaching, what are the steps that you would lay out for this person, Dr. Brown?
Well, let me say this. To answer your question, I do know of a woman. She managed to get herself a doctorate, and she was excellent in her area, but she never accepted herself as being. She never accepted herself for who she was, and it was so bad that the only pleasure she gave herself was eating. While she made multiple six figures, and she never had any money because she was always giving money to her family. They always found a reason why they had to have X, Y, and Z. And so all she was able to do was pay her rent and buy good food. This lady ended up being, I don't know, almost like 400 or 500 pounds.
Wow.
And she was a healthcare worker. So it is possible to excel in one area of your life and to do poorly in other areas of your life. One way that people can start to become aware of where they are in life is to look at the wheel of life. You can go on the internet and punch in wheel of life, and what will come up is a round circle that is broken into several pieces that helps you to look at different parts of your life and helps you to judge, where am I in this part of my life? Now, this woman clearly knew that while she was excellent in her job and very well respected, she knew that she wasn't up to par. She had no relationship. She barely had any money. She lived like a poor woman. And what could she do about it? Well, again, the two options that I mentioned to you. One is you can try to become aware, first of all, and listening to programs like this helps to build that awareness. You can choose to go for regular counseling. You can choose to go for Christian counseling.
Okay. The thing is that when you mention these things, they sound so they sound like just a good idea, and you don't realize how it impacts your life until you are really struggling. Then people start running for counseling. But the idea here on the eSpeaks platform is for us to give you the awareness so that you pursue coaching, self-development, personal growth proactively, as opposed to being reactive. When there's a crisis, then you say, I got to get the fire hose and put out the fire. And so this platform exists to give people the mindset, to help people with the mindset that taking care of your soul shouldn't be an afterthought. And this conversation that we're having about exchanging your current attitude to get to your altitude embodies that notion that you will receive this message, but more than that, that you will make the appointment with one of the coaches so that you can get or start at least start the conversation, so that you can start digging into the different areas of your life that may need to be confronted. And this idea of the wheel of life, I went on Google and looked it up, and it focuses on spirituality, on the hobbies and the recreation and personal growth, your family, kids, social friends, career, business, money, health, fitness, all these major quadrants of our lives that really, when they're out of sync, they wreak havoc. But too often we are reactive as opposed to being proactive. And we may be excelling in one area of our lives, and it can fool us into thinking that we're okay. And I think that's one of the big things to be cautious of is that you can deceive yourself, or I can deceive myself into thinking, well, I'm running a business, I got my husband, I got my kids, I think I'm okay. When the truth is, I need to focus on taking care of my soul, because the externalities doesn't necessarily represent what's really going on inside.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to reach out to the eSpeaks platform. Dr. Brown is accessible through the platform, as well as Coach Genevieve Queenum, and drop us a message at Eves, and my email address is angela@evespeaks.com, or you can just reach out to us on social media. on the Eve Speaks website, evespeaks.com. Are there any last thoughts that you'd like to share? Anybody have any questions that you want to ask? Now is the time to do it. We're going to wrap up, unless, of course, either Coach Genevieve or Dr. Brown has some closing remarks.
That was a very good conversation, very insightful and very, very instructive.
Indeed.
And to everyone, I'll say you are worth it. Okay? You are worth it.
Yes. So thank you to our audience for coming, for stopping by. Again, please send in your questions if you have any, and we look forward to another episode next week where we continue to pursue the personal growth conversation. Thank you once again, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.